Glucose by Jack, Brody, and Dominic.
The chemistry of sugar. In 1891, a German chemist named Emil Fischer discovered the chemical structure of glucose, along with a handful of other types of sugars. Glucose is one of the simplest types of monosaccharides, or sugars. Glucose, along with other monosaccharides, are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, specifically 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen. Another common monosaccharide is fructose, also known as fruit sugar. The chemical formula for these types of sugars may be the same, but the way they are arranged strongly impacts what they will become. These are called isomers. Disaccharides are made of 2 monosaccharide units. Sucrose, also known as table sugar, is a disaccharide made of glucose and fructose. The way these 2 monosaccharides come together to form sucrose is from the removal of a molecule of water between the OH at carbon number 1 of alpha glucose and the OH of carbon number 2 of beta fructose. Glucose is involved in each type of disaccharide: sucrose, maltose, and lactose. There is also a different way to show glucose, and that is a cyclic form. On the left, there is alpha glucose, and on the right, there is beta glucose. They are very similar in structure, but their main difference is their hydroxyl group. The alpha glucose has the hydroxyl group on the bottom, and the beta glucose has the hydroxyl group on top. The reason that we as humans like the sweet taste is because it is associated with tasty food, like ripe fruit. The reason that it tastes sweet is because how the chemical makeup of sugar breaks down, then attracts to the part of the tongue that tastes sweetness. This is also why artificial sweeteners exist. They are attracted to the sweet parts of the tongue the same way sugar is. This is also why antifreeze tastes kind of sweet. Don't drink it. It will kill you.
Is it time for a crusade? Yes, Jackson. Indeed it is.
Sugar was first introduced to Europe by crusaders returning in the 13th century. It was used by those who could afford it to season to go along with meats, sauces, fish meals. For the next 3 centuries, it became and remained a delicacy, similar to spices at the same time. Sugar can be harvested from many plants. In tropical areas, it is commonly farmed from sugarcane and sugar beets. The more popular of the two is sugarcane. Originating from the South Pacific and southern India, the popularity of farming sugarcane as a source of sugar spread up into Asia and west into the Middle Eastern countries. Eventually, the production of sugarcane reached North Africa and Spain. Its widespread production allowed it to become more readily available to the general public in the 15th century, but still wasn't very cheap. When the 16th century hit, sugar was now the sweetener of choice in Europe for the general public. In the 17th and 18th centuries, it only got more popular with the widespread discovery of jams and jellies. In the 17th century, the yearly per capita consumption of sugars was 4 pounds. Sounds like a lot, but today that has risen to 100 pounds per capita, which leaves the question, with all of that demand, where did the sugar come from? All of European sugar was coming from the Middle East. Then word came back to European explorers that hot tropic lands in Brazil and the West Indies. It didn't take long for the cultivation of sugarcane fields to start. Farming sugarcane was hard, backbreaking work. Europeans didn't have enough manpower to fill the demands that were coming from back home, so they turned to West Africa, which up until this point was mainly untouched by European powers, besides some domestic trading with Spain and Portugal. The massive amount of capital that could be attained from the backs of slaves farming sugarcane was so great that England, France, Holland, Prussia, Denmark, and Sweden all took part in the slave trade out of West Africa. The first slave-grown sugarcane arrived in Europe in 1515. After the success of the first sugarcane farm in Hispaniola, it took till the 16th century for the Portuguese settlements in Brazil, Mexico, and many of the Caribbean islands to start producing. Then, in the West Indies, the English, French, and Dutch colonies all started producing sugarcanes on the back of slaves. With all of these sugarcane farms, the demand for slaves was very high. It was estimated that over 15 million slaves were taken from the coast of West Africa. The trade of sugar and slaves brought great wealth to many European countries, and was a golden age for many of these countries. It can be observed that the slave and sugar trade brought the financial conditions in England and France to produce an industrial revolution in both countries. The Industrial Revolution brought even more economic gain, and it could be said that without the slave and sugar trade, that humanity might not be as developed as it is today.
Society more and more has been doing research on diabetes as time has gone on. Sugar has affected society by creating a problem, a disease known as diabetes. so the way that we respond with positive research on this illness is significant. In ancient India, there was a test used with ants, where if the ants were attracted to your urine, it is a sign of diabetes because the ants are attracted to the sugar. This means you have a high blood sugar level. Because sugar is such an essential in a lot of foods, it is being promoted regardless of its health effect. Diabetes is a disease when your blood glucose gets too high. Blood sugar is your main source of energy, and it comes from the food you eat. Our cells rely on glucose. Insulin is a hormone made by our pancreas, and it helps us to counter the high sugar. When our blood sugar is too high, there is not enough insulin in our bodies to counter it. Today, controlling glucose levels is a major part in treatment. Type 1 diabetes can be treated with insulin as well as dietary changes. Type 2 diabetes may be managed with non-insulin medications, insulin dietary changes, or weight reduction.